Welcome to the NWR Resources Investment Series. My name is Kerry Stevenson. Up next, we have Queensland Pacific Metals. ASX code is QPM. Now, they're the owner of the 100% Townsville Energy Chemicals Hub. We'll affectionately call it the Tech Hub project. And that's going to be advanced, modern, sustainable producer of critical chemicals for the emerging lithium-ion sector. Pretty exciting times for Queensland Pacific. 15 months ago, ladies and gentlemen, their share price was just over a cent. And if you'd got in then, you'd be a very happy shareholder today, because we're currently looking at a 24-cent share price. And Stephen is going to say that there's a lot more to come. Here joining me today is Stephen Grocott. He is the Managing Director. Stephen, over to you. Re-energising Australia with critical battery metals production.
Thank you, Kerry. You just gave my presentation. That's excellent. I'll go to Q&As now. No.
Yeah, actually, good point, Stephen. If you've got questions, ladies and gentlemen, pop them in the panel below, and we'll get to those at the end of the presentation. Thanks, Stephen.
Great. Thank you very much, Kerry, and a pleasure to be here. I'm just going to give you an update on the QPM Tech project. Many of you would be familiar with it, so today I'm just going to give an update of the progress that we've made. So you know the drill here, but my next three slides are about an important part of a rapidly changing transportation and energy storage market. It's a big change to this particular world, and such a big change that in 10 to 15 years' time, we probably won't recognise, looking back, the world we're in at the moment. So I'm going to talk about some of these changes, which in some ways parallel what happened 110 years ago. And I'm going to look at what I call some speedometers. Here's the first one. Now, nickel prices have doubled on steady rises over the last 5 years towards a new baseline. The nickel price in the future is likely to be set by the cost of converting nickel pig iron into battery grade chemicals. Nickel pig iron is 14% iron, 14% nickel, balance is iron, roughly. And battery grade chemicals, of course, are 99.95% purity nickel feedstocks. So the incentive price for converting nickel pig iron into battery grade chemicals is about $20,000 to $25,000 per tonne. As a side note, by the way, that conversion process is pretty dirty and unlikely to meet the ESG requirements for non-Chinese batteries. The second speedometer to talk about are nickel inventories. They're declining and approaching recent record lows. The demand forecasts for nickel going forward are also very substantial. Now, the question for investors is this combination of high prices and low inventories a flash in the pan, like has happened in the past and was resolved in the past? Because it was resolved in the past. About 14 years ago, nickel price spiked, inventories went low, and that problem was solved through rapidly expanding nickel pig iron for the stainless steel and alloys industry. So this combination today of high price, low inventory, is it a flash in the pan, or is it part of a longer term and growing trend? So I'll look at the last speedo that I've got, and that is the forecasts. Now, the forecast is that this is not a flash in the pan. This graph shows only the nickel consumed in the EV and battery market. Underneath this x-axis is about 2.5 million tonnes a year of nickel consumption for stainless steel and alloys, a market which, by the way, is growing at a 4 to 5% CAGR. The battery demand nickel market has a forecast CAGR of 32%. Now, I don't know what's scariest, 32% CAGR when there's an almost empty pipeline of battery grade nickel projects, or the fact that this forecast made 2 years ago underestimated things by about a factor of 2. In fact, things are tracking at the high demand or rapid adoption end of this curve. Now, the reason for that is because a rapid EV uptake, and that's because of a bunch of factors. Low greenhouse gas emissions intensity, vastly improved urban air quality, government regulations and incentives, driving performance. In the future, you will not be a petrol head, you'll be a battery head. It's not surprising, given that for the the petrol heads and battery heads, you can go out and buy an EV that is 0 to 100 in 3 seconds. That's pretty impressive for a street vehicle, an affordable street vehicle, and near total cost of ownership parity. Now, despite all of this, like me, you may have been skeptical that the world's really going to change that quickly. Well, it did in the past, and it will probably do it again. Yeah. When did it happen in the past? 120 odd years ago. This is New York City, 1900. Where's the car? I've helped you out there. There is the one car in that photograph.
Wow.
So 13 years later, note, only 13 years later, same street scene, where is the horse? Now, I can't help you there because there ain't a horse to be found. Now, in that transition, which happened very, very quickly, who made the money? Who made the most money? It wasn't the car manufacturers, it was the oil companies. So who are the oil companies today of the EV industry? You guessed it, it's the companies that are going to be making the battery chemicals and feedstocks, hence the QPM Tech project. So on to that. Now, this slide is just an overview summary of the project, assuming that you're already familiar with it and familiar with the direct nickel process that we'll be employing. If you're not, go to our website and look at the investor sections and other sections there. But just in summary, we'll be importing just over 1.5 million wet tons per annum of a high-grade nickel laterite ore, the limonite fraction of that ore, that's the top half of the ore body. We'll be importing that from New Caledonia, where there is no market, not much of a market for that limonite ore. We'll be importing that into the port of Townsville. That's only 7 days shipping. And that is the same port where the same ore from the same mines was imported into the now closed Queensland Nickel Refinery. We feed that ore through the direct nickel process, and the nickel and cobalt passes through to a conventional, commercially proven solvent extraction based nickel and cobalt refinery to produce the 99.5% battery purity chemicals. Along the way, without us doing anything special, we don't try to do this. This is just a true byproduct of the process. We produce hematite and magnesia, and we'll also take some of the aluminium hydroxide byproduct and refine that to some high purity alumina. Now, we're not trying to be clever here in producing all these byproducts. Even if there was zero value in the hematite and the magnesia, we'd still be producing it. It's just that we'd be having to put them into a residue storage facility. So we don't do anything to produce them. They come along for the ride. Interestingly, you'll find out there companies which have got aims to produce a similar amount of high purity alumina. They have market capitalizations of about, similar to us, 300 to 400 million Aussie dollars. But the HPA represents only 10 to 15% of our revenue. So I think I smell an opportunity there. Hopefully you do too. Now, this all looks great, and we think so anyway. The Queensland government also thinks it looks great because they recently recognised the reality and the value of this project and just awarded a prescribed project status. Now, this formal recognition assists with approvals and communications with local, state, and even Commonwealth governments and the private sector. It's a great outcome for us. Now, just a small aside here, you don't hear too many public companies give state bureaucrats a plug. It's usually the other way around, but I will. The staff in the Queensland Office of the Coordinator General are fantastic. They're smart, experienced, pragmatic, hardworking, and proactive. They're a considerable help for our project team, and I want to thank them for that. So, the Queensland government thinks we look good, but more importantly, the biggest lithium-ion battery producer in the world, LG Energy Solution, also thinks that. You can read the details for yourself, but why would a highly successful battery behemoth, and I call them a behemoth because their forward order book for lithium-ion batteries is $200 billion US.
Goodness me.
I mean, it's staggering. Numbers are staggering, and that's why that horse and cart to internal combustion engine scenario can change with ICEs into electric vehicles. So, why did LG after many months of due diligence and investigation, invest in us. Well, we're fast to market. There's no mine, it's simple approvals. We have an attractive project site, elite ESG credentials, technically attractive, and the list goes on. They brought POSCO into the equation to assist with the technical valuation, and here we are today. So we will have one of the biggest and one of the fastest growing battery materials companies investing in us. Now, you don't have to listen to what I say, they speak for themselves. This is not a script that we gave them for our ASX announcement. These were their words. And in fact, it is the first investment of LG Energy Solution into their supply chain. Now, I mentioned the ESG credentials. They include, amongst other things, we have no process liquid discharge, we have no tailings, and we are in a tier 1 jurisdiction. And of course, increasingly important today, very low greenhouse gas emissions intensity. Now, earlier this year, we released an LCA analysis showing we'd be a low greenhouse gas emitter. But at the time, we also flagged the possibility of going a lot further. And that's demonstrated in this slide here. We're looking at capturing waste coal mine gas. That's the methane that is emitted in coal mining. In this case, the Northern Bowen Basin, really high quality metallurgical coal mines. They're very gassy mines. They have a lot of methane. And for safety reasons, those underground mines, they have to drill that and drain that gas. Currently, it primarily gets flared or it just gets vented. And in the open cut mines, that methane gets directly vented. Now, the prevalence of those methane emissions, for example, are shown in this satellite photograph of the Bowen Basin. You can see the high methane concentration coinciding with these mines. Now, methane's a bad dude. CO2 emissions are bad enough, from the flaring of this gas, but the methane emissions are even worse because for every ton of methane you emit, that's like emitting 25 tons of CO2. It's basically the methane's like a black paint. It soaks up the heat. So why can we do this? Why can we harvest this gas, especially those fugitive emissions, and use them in our process and offset those CO2 emissions and get that credit? It's because these coal mines are stranded assets. They're not connected to a pipeline that goes to the East Coast gas network or to the LNG production facility. They have a pipeline going straight past them, which also happens to run straight past our plant. And unfortunately, there's not a user at the end since the Queensland nickel refinery shut down. That was the big user. That shut down. Now there are a couple of rats and mice users. So that is a key advantage of our location and why we chose it. North Queensland Gas Pipeline runs straight past the eastern boundary of our property. There are many other advantages to our location, and I'll cover them in a minute. But importantly, for
Stephen, sorry to interrupt you. So that pipeline, you then harvest that waste gas in order to fuel your project. Is that correct? And is it as simple as tapping into it? Is there a lot of infrastructure that needs to go in, or is it?
Perfect question. No, in fact, we step off the eastern boundary and we're standing on top of where the pipeline is. So it's just a letdown station. Very simple. You couldn't ask for anything better. I'll cover that in the next slide, actually. But on the ESG credentials, a lot of people talk about, zero carbon, zero carbon, zero carbon. Well, often there's a lot of zero truth in that. It's a bunch of greenwash. The only legitimate way to determine your greenhouse gas emissions intensity is to conduct an ISO compliant, that's the International Standards Organization compliant, life cycle analysis. It's complex work. We've engaged a company called Minviro in the UK to do exactly that. They did it for us earlier this year to show we were low, and we're engaged with them at the moment. And we expect and hope that in the next couple of weeks, we'll be able to demonstrate that we're not just zero, but we're less than zero. And that will be a great outcome. That's in part because of the investments we're making with our partners to capture this gas, and in part because of our location that Kerry was just asking about. If you want to write a script for a location, this is it. You can read these words yourself. It is the perfect location. And the one that Kerry was alluding to, that green line is the North Queensland Gas Pipeline. There's our project site, literally on the eastern boundary, just a small letdown station. from that pipeline. That pipeline, which has got 35 petajoules a year of capacity, and currently has about a 4 consumption going up, and that's it. So, you know, we're next to everything we need, just the short connection costs and the gas letdown station, a good connection to the power line going straight past us. So great location. You know, one of the really important ones is we're effectively a chemical manufacturing facility. You need a skilled workforce. Choose a location where you've got a skilled workforce. Townsville, a great location. Great universities, education facilities, highly skilled workforce, particularly underemployed because of the shutdown of the Queensland nickel refinery. So a very good location. And if you don't have someone, it's not exactly a hardship location to hire someone into the edge of the Great Barrier Reef. Very nice spot. So this is what our plant site will look like. It's one of a number of layout options that we're looking at. This angular projection doesn't make it clear, but this area labelled expansion is actually about the same area as this. So we have an inbuilt opportunity to duplicate this plant, cookie cutter, build another single train of production to double the site. But we're going to walk before we sprint. So this is the project, one of the layouts. Now the direct nickel production process that's reflected in this layout here was piloted about 15 years ago by a company called Direct Nickel. It was piloted about 19 times by them. Reasonably successful, but unfortunately the world at that stage didn't need clean, sustainable, high purity nickel. It only needed nickel for stainless steel. And so the timing was unfortunate for them. The timing is more fortunate for us. We also piloted it just to confirm, and we piloted it with the ore from the mines that we have MOUs with, and we produced the battery chemicals. Here shows the ore. This is an intermediate that you can produce, a mixed hydroxide precipitate, which we refine to the nickel and cobalt sulfate. This is an inert residue. About 20% of the ore ends up as an inert residue. Compare that with the competing technology, high pressure acid leach, where you end up with 1.2 to 1.4 tons of residue sitting in tailings for every ton of ore that you process. And the reason why they have so much sitting in tailings is they only take out the nickel and cobalt. We take out the other products in the direct nickel process. The main one being this one here, hematite. The ore is 40 to 50% iron. Now, Andrew Forrest, through FMG, sells some ore at 58% iron. So this is almost iron ore. When we take out all the other material, what's left? High purity hematite. Just agglomerate it and sell it to the steelmaking industry. That also means you don't have it sitting in a tailings dam. And you've got an inert residue, which is primarily quartz sand, which we hope to repurpose as an engineered landfill, yet to be confirmed.
2 minutes, Stephen.
So over the past 15 months, this is what our share price has done. And that's primarily been because we progressively ticked a bunch of boxes along the way. And we've done that steadily. We aim to continue to do that. Here's what we'll do next. Further de-risking the project. We're part of the way through a DFS with a Hatch, prove up these ESG credentials, advance some of the test work on HPA, and we've embarked already upon the funding studies and discussions. Corporate overview, you can read that for yourself. What it doesn't show here is that we have a great team on our ExCo to take this project forward. And you need more than a location and a great ore body and a great process. You need great people. And I'm lucky enough to be working with an excellent ExCo who've got huge experience in this industry. So thank you very much. And I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you, Kerry.
Thank you, Stephen. A brilliant presentation. Congratulations on all of the support that you've got from the Queensland Government and the advancement that you're making with it. Now, we've got a lot of questions here. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll try and get through them. But if you do have any other questions, make sure you put it in that Q&A panel. Nicholas asks, do you think Tesla opting for LFP batteries for a couple of their models is the start of a fundamental shift away from the nickel and cobalt demand in the battery space?
It's a fundamental recognition of the lack of nickel supply, because the nickel-rich batteries are by far the best, both through total cost of ownership and range of vehicles. So Tesla are primarily only using that in their Chinese market and the short range batteries. They're still a huge battery nickel consumer. Just an example of that is the deal that they've just signed with BHP in WA to source the nickel sulfate from their operations just south of Perth, and the deal that they've just signed with Prony Resources, the Goro refinery in New Caledonia. So Benchmark Mineral Intelligence, you don't have to listen to me, listen to Benchmark Mineral Intelligence, who forecasts increasing proportion of electric vehicle batteries being nickel rich because they have a longer range, faster charge, longer battery life, and no one wants to get stranded on a low charge battery.
Yeah, so it's just Tesla hedging their bets. Easton, if you think that your question hasn't been answered, pop another question below, but I think we did answer your infrastructure for the capture and cap delivery of the flared gas. Rich says, with the change in ownership of the New Cal mine to Prony, do you have a guaranteed offtake agreement?
So we have no connection with Prony Resources. They have a mine which they use to supply only the Goro high pressure acid leach refinery. There are many other miners in New Caledonia. We have agreements and in further discussion with 3 of the major miners. That's SLN, who are owned by Eramet, the French company, SMGM and SMT. There are other miners as well. So we're not dealing with Prony Resources or the Goro mine. It's interesting to note that New Caledonia has, in the limonite fraction of the ore, which is currently not really exported, and that's the top half of the ore body. What's exported is the bottom half of the ore body to smelters, which is not a good fit for battery production. But that top half of the ore body, the limonite half, there's 33 million tons of nickel in known resources in New Caledonia, and they don't have a home for it. So our process, we can take the top half of the bottom half, but the top half is relatively unloved. And we've come along and said, listen, you're going to mine through that top half to get to the bottom half so you can export it or process it. We'll take the top half. It's the same nickel equivalent grade, but it comes at a much lower price because it's such a nice synergy for them. So no, we don't connect with Goro. They've got huge resource. They could export that ore if they wanted, but that's tied up for their production.
All right, I'm going to try and get through all of these. Your plan, if or when the underground coal mines close, what are you going to do about gas supply?
Those underground coal mines and open cut metallurgical coal mines, they're the highest grade metallurgical coal mines in the world. Until you don't need coking coal for steel production, those mines will keep on going. They're very profitable and very high quality, amongst the highest in the world. But there will come a time, presumably, when steel production won't need coking coal, be it to green hydrogen or something else. That time will happen when there's an economic incentive for doing it, and we will just convert our fuel to that. So be it hydrogen or whatever.
All right.
All of our burners can process either hydrogen or gas as fuel.
Great. Any reason why the results from the DFS would be significantly less impressive than the results we saw on the PFS?
It depends what sort of metrics you're looking at. In the DFS, we are not increasing, we're increasing everything about 2.7 fold, but we are not increasing the production of the high purity alumina. The high purity alumina in the PFS was about 30% of our revenue. At this larger scale, it's only about 10 to 15% of our revenue. Obviously, exchange rates have changed. Steel and concrete have changed. Nickel price have changed. Well, in fact, has gone up and so forth. So no, fundamentally, this is a much better project to build because it's bigger. It's actually easier to get the equipment for this larger scale project than the smaller scale one. We were down at the bottom end of the range. We're now sort of in the middle of the pack for the size of the unit operations we're talking about. So a bit hard to make forward-looking statements. But no, fundamentally, it looks very sound. What has changed since actually the PFS is the massive growth in the importance of ESG credentials. I used to say that people won't pay more for your nickel just because it's clean and green, but they will invest in you. But that's even changing. I wouldn't have thought in 2 years' time that it would change that quickly. But now you've got companies saying, no, we will pay more for clean green nickel.
Yeah. 100%. I want to get to this last question, Stephen, because we're out of time, but I want to ask this one. It's from Khan. Thanks for a great presentation. As a shareholder, he wants to know how the fundraising process is progressing. If he understands it correctly, the company will start moving to development phase in April 2022. Is that still the target?
So the fundraising, we've engaged KPMG as our debt advisors. They're reaching out to the banks. We are well engaged with NAIF and Export Finance Australia, NAIF, the Northern Australia Infrastructure Fund. NAIF and EFA, we expect to be significant investors and debt providers for our project. We tick a lot of their boxes. We've already got through the first hurdle with NAIF, and they're embarking upon their due diligence for us. So that's progressing very well. I think since we last spoke at this forum, we certainly wouldn't have achieved that on the debt side. There's obviously equity to be raised as well. Sorry, there was another part of the question I don't recall, Kerry. I think it was the debt process. The timing. Yeah. So yeah, the timing, we were looking at end of Q1 for the completion of the feasibility study. There's a slight time overrun with that, but we're only talking about a couple of months. So we're still looking around the middle of the year, aiming for hopefully having the debt lined up and therefore final investment decision.
Well, a fantastic presentation, Stephen. As I said right at the start, that share price is going in the right direction for you, ticking all the boxes, very ESG compliant as well, which is fantastic. Really appreciate you joining us at the NWR Virtual Resources Series today. Thanks, Stephen.